Hey guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today we are headed out on the lake to go do some summer bass fishing. Come along. Today is going to be a lot of fun. We are going after bass that are specifically eating small bait fish. It's one of the biggest problems with summer bass fishing. You see fish blowing up, you see fish chasing bait, but you throw to them and you can't catch them. And a lot of the time it's because the bait fish that they are chasing this time of year are so small that regular lures don't do a good job of replicating them. So today we're heading out specifically targeting fish that are eating little bait. I've got everything from poppers to downsized jerkbaits, small swimbaits, tiny crankbaits, flukes, double flukes, but not regular flukes, little tiny flukes, to specifically imitate those smaller bait fish and to see if we can use that to consistently catch some of these fish. Hey, buddy. Got him. Throwing that albino largo. One thing about throwing these downsized baits, throwing finesse in general, is I think a lot of people mistake finesse for catching small fish. Now, I, of all people, I tend to be a power fisherman. I love to power fish and I love to target big fish. Finesse does not target big fish, but it still catches them. The difference is it catches everything. So when we're doing something like this, throwing all these downsized baits, little micro baits, granted the 3-inch largo is not micro, but it is small. When we're trying to match bait fish size, there will be a lot of bycatch, and that means catching things other than the intended species. So out here I might catch white bass, perch, bluegill, crappie, right? There's all these other things that will eat, but so will bass of all sizes. So I look at that, especially in the summer, especially when it's hot, I look at that as a positive, you know? Catching anything is more fun than catching nothing. And a lot of times, if you're matching the right size bait, you'll catch those big ones too. Got him. Nice. Switched over, I wanted a little more flash. Switched over to that Picasso with a 3.3 Kitech on it. The Kitech, let me spot on it. The Kitech was really the first, at least that I used, the first swim bait that really had that naturalism going for it in a downsized little package, that little Picasso single barrel. The 2.8 and the 3.3 are just amazing for matching the hatch, if you will, for dialing in smaller bait fish patterns. But you can go even smaller in the Easy Shiner, which is a different shape Kitech. You can go all the way down to a 2-inch, and that 2-inch Easy Shiner is tiny, tiny. That's probably the best bait there is for matching truly micro bait. He came back for it. Little guy, but take him. And look at this. spit that out. Thank you, my friend. This is kind of nasty, but hopefully you can see this. He had in his mouth a shad that's 3/4 of an inch long, one that's about 1.25 inches, and one that with a tail on it was probably 3 inches, which would be about like my Kitech, the biggest one. That is a prime example of how small a stuff these fish can be chasing around and specifically feeding on. And it's easy to see why throwing a 5 or 6 inch swim bait or throwing a full size topwater as opposed to a downsized little popper could make a huge difference. Or, you know, here's the Whopper Plopper 110. Where's my little guy? Look at the difference here. The 110, which isn't even the big one, the 130 and the 190 are so much larger. And then look at that tiny guy. But you're targeting those exact same fish. Again, it's not something that I do every day. We'll get more into it here in a little bit, but it's not something I do every day. But when it's time, you need to embrace it. Don't fight it. Don't go back and forth on throwing smaller stuff. Don't downsize part way, go all the way, and you'll find that you can catch a lot of fish. Did we get something on a jerkbait? Big old, well, big for the species, big old yellow bass. This is, let's see if I can do this without getting spiked. This is a tiny jerkbait by 13 Fishing. It's a little whippersnapper. And that is the best small jerkbait that I've found. There are all sorts of little options out there, but most of them aren't very functional. And that one is functional. I really like it. All right, it's gotten completely slick here all of a sudden in front of this enormous thunderhead wall that's coming out of nowhere and was not in the forecast, but that's okay. I want to talk through the baits in case I end up having to call it quits and we don't get to do any more fishing. But just circling back, this whole concept is in the summer and in the fall, I run into a lot as I travel around the country, so I'm sure you do too, where the bass are not chasing big threadfin or big gizzards. They're chasing these little tiny, from like 3 inch down to micro little bait fish. And those are some of the most difficult bass to target, and I know a lot of people struggle with it. So I'm gonna walk you through what I tied on today, not necessarily what I caught them on, because until right now it wasn't slick. So if it had been slick like this, I think we would have seen fish up on top chasing bait, and I would have got to show you how all these top waters would work, but that's okay. The important thing is the information. So that Largo shad on a guppy head is the first one. That's a bait that I throw a lot. I mean, it's not new, so I won't spend any time there. These are not in any particular order. I'll just start grabbing. Next one was that Kitech on that underspin, that little 3.3 Kitech. And again, a 3.3 or a 2.8 in the fat swing impact are amazing for imitating shad. And then if you've got that true micro bait, the smaller sizes of the Easy Shiner are incredible. These two are stuck. Again, that tiny Whopper Plopper, we already talked about that, so I won't put a bunch of time in there. And how the gear you throw this stuff on matters a lot too. I'm throwing some of them on bait casters. I'm throwing some of them on spinning tackle. Just don't be afraid to downsize. But again, downsize all the way. If I'm throwing, you know, a jig and I think, oh no, they're not eating this, I don't go down to a slightly smaller jig and then a slightly smaller jig and then no. I go down to a tiny little Kitech tungsten jig, a micro jig. And if that doesn't work, I go to a Ned rig, right? If I'm bottom fishing. Well, same thing when you're mid-column. If they're not eating your normal stuff, go to the other end of the spectrum. Try that and then work back. So Shimano came out with their line of crankbaits. This is the tiny one, that little 39 size, the one that I've said is perfect for BFS. Today I'm actually throwing that on a spinning rod. Just an awesome little shad profile, an emphasis on little. I mean, it's tiny. And it's hard to find baits that run right. I mean, you can go down the crappie aisle of your local store and find all sorts of things in the right size, but a lot of that stuff doesn't actually fish well. These are baits that fish well. And then of course a popper. You know, Megabass Pop X. We spend a lot of time throwing the Pop Max. But again, when it's time to downsize, we go all the way down to the Pop X or even smaller. There are smaller offerings like Rapala's got a little tiny popper that I brought with me today, but I didn't tie that one on. Oh, one just blew up right here. That's the first boil I've really seen. And then, what do we have here? A double, wow, that storm is coming quick. It's about to block out the sun. My good, we might call it early. A double fluke rig. So if you're not familiar, well, these are Super Fluke Juniors. So I like to throw the Super Fluke on a 4/0 hook. I'm throwing these on a 2/0 hook. And what it is I tie one on about a 36-inch length of leader. On one end, I tie a swivel. On the other end, I tie the bait. Then I tie another one on about 18 or 24 inches. Same deal, one end is a swivel, one end is the bait. I take my main line and I put it through the eye of the shorter one, and then I tie it to the longer one, and that leaves me with one bait about a foot ahead of the other. And when I start working and popping and twitching that rod, these baits dance and move independently of one another. It looks incredible. But again, I went down to a Super Fluke Junior and a 2/0 hook instead of that standard Super Fluke with a 4/0 super line. Then I also tied on a regular fluke. That one's on a nose hook rig on spinning tackle. So you put a screw lock into the nose, and then I take that hook and I hook through the nose and through the screw lock so it's strong and won't just get ripped off every time a fish looks at the thing. And then last but not least, I don't even know what it is. What is it? Ah, yes, that whippersnapper little jerkbait, which again is an awesome little jerkbait. It dives like 3 to 6, but just fishes really well. A lot of times when you go to small stuff, they're not as functional as they are in the larger sizes, but that is a killer little bait. So again, I'm gonna try and fish a little bit longer. I guess if you see fish catches after this, you know that I caught them. If you don't, that'll be that. But my gosh, that's coming. I don't know if you guys can see, well, you can't. This end of it, it is coming quick. So I'm gonna try and fish just a little bit more, and then I'm gonna have to get off the water. But I know this is something that a lot of people struggle with. I would have liked to have seen them up busting and really caught a bunch of fish with you. That was my goal. But sometimes we just take what we're dealt, and in this case, it's a pretty nasty storm. All right, guys, just as soon as I hit stop, the lightning started cracking over my shoulder. So I am out of here. We're gonna wrap it up. But in the video description, along with these baits and the gear, I will link you some great budget options, because the biggest struggle with throwing finesse stuff is actually throwing it. But there is some budget gear that does a great job. You don't have to break the bank and get really high in tackle to be able to cast this stuff. It's more about using really thin lines and a good quality reel. So I'll link you some good options for the various baits. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Sorry we have to cut it short. Don't get to catch some more fish, but I don't mess with the weather. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.